What's up, true z0inked warriors? It's your boy Taylor, the top mid from Merlock, here today with a rig rundown. I'm going to be breaking down all of my guitars, my trusty rig, and all of my pedals that I use on our albums and live over the past few years. I'm a very sentimental person, especially when it comes to gear. I'm not necessarily someone who's always out looking to get the biggest and best new gear. I really like something with a story, and everything I have behind me is something that has a story behind it, has a purpose to it. So if you want to hear more about my rig, stay tuned. I'm also actively building up this YouTube channel. So if you could give us a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, it would not be all for naught. It will help us in our never-ending battle against Big Riff. So first up, I have my brand new Woodrite Warlord. So like a few years back, Shay, who runs Woodbine, hit me up on Instagram. We've been homies ever since. It's been really exciting to see Woodrite grow out of Woodbine, especially seeing how Steve from Does It Doom, who has done so much for not only like the Doom community, but building a Doom economy, which I will always find kind of funny because no matter what Finn McKenty says about us, we're the only subgenre with our own damn economy. So this thing is super sweet. I ended up picking out the Gold Burst. They have a really sweet Silver Burst model, but this Gold Burst actually reminds me more of the aged Silver Burst look. That was really what I wanted. I never wanted one of the new Silver Bursts. I wanted one of the cool, old, aged Silver Bursts that Adam Jones uses. So I think this kind of is a little bit closer to that look. This thing comes set up in C standard. It has two Woodrite Barbarian pickups. He says they're designed for fuzz. I'm probably the only guy in Doom that doesn't particularly love fuzz, but they have this amazing ability to break up while also maintaining clarity, which is something I've struggled with my other guitars. I just got it a few weeks back, and I've only gotten to play one show with it, but it was a hell of a show. And it was so rad to show up with the Woodrite Warlord and feel like the Warlord. I know I am. So this is going to be my main guitar going forward, both for writing and live. The other two Les Pauls I have, the job has kind of been split up between those two things, but I'm really stoked to have one unit that really fits all of my needs, and I'm very needy. I also picked up a Nebula strap for this, the purple Cleopatra with hints of gold in it, and it also has a seatbelt bag. And I was talking to them on Instagram, and I said, my dude, I do not play with a shirt live. And I am an incredibly sweaty man. After our last tour, I remember opening up my guitar case a week later, and my guitar strap was still damp and musty. And I was like, I need something that's not going to absorb all of my sweat. And he was kind enough to point me in the direction of having a seatbelt backing. And I haven't gotten to use the strap live yet, but you can tell it's not going to absorb a lot of sweat. So if you're a dude like me who does not like to wear shirts, especially in front of large groups of people, I highly recommend Nebula. It was such a sweet process. I talked to him, and he actually got it shipped out in the next day or so. I'm not sure if that's always something he's able to do, but it was really rad to just hit someone up on Instagram and get something built. It has the cool gold rivets. He pointed me in a bunch of cool directions. I'm also using Schaller strap locks on that because I found them in gold, and I'm all about the gold life now. So next up is my blue Epiphone Prophecy. It has this really rad blue marble on it. It has a bracelet my homie gave me back in the day, and I picked this up at a Guitar Center about 7 years ago. It was another situation where they had a Silver Burst Les Paul, and I was trying it out, And, you know, I knew I needed to try another guitar just to make sure my head was on straight before I bought it. And I picked this one up just because of the rad finish on it. From the second I held it, I knew it was a really special guitar. I think they only did 1 or 2 runs of these Prophecies, but they're incredibly well-built machines. It comes stock with the 81, 85 pickups, most notably used by Zakk Wylde. And let me tell you, if you love doing pinch harmonics, this is for you. And I do love doing pinch harmonics. You should see our cover of Electric Funeral, where I do a pinch harmonic every other note. And, you know, I think they designed this kind of going after that LTD EC market. It really reminds me of one of those, especially with the custom inlays and the coloring. A lot of those ECs have that cool marble look to them. But what's really special about this is it has a super slim tapered neck, and I've never played another neck like it. It is so smooth, and the asymmetrical nature of it is super friendly in the hand. This has been my main live guitar from Merlock for some time. You can tell it's been through hell because the strap lock screw stripped out of this on our last tour. I ended up just gaffing it all together, and I have not gotten around to fixing it yet. So lastly, we have my very first electric guitar, this black Epiphone Les Paul. My parents got this for me when I was 16. They were divorced at the time, but still came together to put in money for me to get my first electric guitar. This guitar is kind of like the Megazord of friendship for me. I have a bunch of customization in it. Obviously, it was all flat black when I bought it, but I got these lace finger burners put in that my buddy Stu, who was kind of my old guitar guru, sensei guy, and that every time I asked for guitar advice, he told me something semi-comprehensible, and then I eventually realized it was totally true. It doesn't have any fret inlays except for the 12th, which I've always really loved. I've also snapped the neck off of this twice, but she always comes back from the dead. Dead girl. So this has been my main writing guitar for a long time. Obviously, we have a long history. We have some really great vibes together. I've never used it as a vibrator, but I would if I was inclined. So next up, I want to talk a little bit about my rig. If you have followed me on social media for a while, you already know what it is. I've got the Traynor YBA-1 with the Worshipper 612. This thing sounds massive. You already know it's got all the mids a boy could ever need. So I picked up this Traynor YBA-1, I want to say back in 2015 or so. I think I actually picked it out after seeing one of those Glenn Fricker videos back when he wasn't always just an old man yelling at a cloud. He did a sweet rundown saying, I think like something like, if you want a tone like the sword, snag this thing. I found one on the local Craigslist for like $450. They're still super affordable. I was pretty broke at the time, but I had just run the merch booth for Migration Fest 2015 out in Olympia and made a little bit of cash off of that, so I was able to pick this up. And I actually bought a Marshall 212 cabinet, a kind of weird one that had slanted speakers that I ended up selling when I moved out to Spokane. So this has been my main head for years. So I do jump the channels, which basically gives me a gain function. It turns my volume 2 into a gain. This amp has next to no headroom, so it's loud AF. Most notably, you'll see that it doesn't have any mid knobs. That's so no one can ever scoop my mids. The core of the tone really comes from the gain staging, my tone knobs. I switch those around kind of depending on the venue. When I was running it out of a 212, I used to just dime this thing. Not as much of an option now that I have a serious cab. Speaking of which, I do have a Worshipper 612 cabinet. I picked this up in 2020 with my Biden bucks. This was a custom piece I had built, hence the purple, and it's stacked with 6 Weber speakers. I have 4 Direwolf which are their mid-range heavy speakers, and then 2 Silver Wolves, which are more of the low, mid-low range. And if you've ever heard this live, you know this thing pushes some air. The YBA-1 might only be a variable wattage amp that comes out to like 50 in general, but paired with this worshiper, it is a force to be reckoned with. I'm super tough. So next up, I'm going to be going through my pedal board. The core of my tone is from these first 3 pedals. I have the Philosopher's Tone, which shapes my tone. It gives it a little more sustain as it comes in out of the amp. The Fulltone OCD, which is my overdrive pedal, and the Corona Chorus. I've always loved Alex Lifeson from Rush. He used to use a lot of chorus just to thicken up his tone, and y'all know I like it thick. So these 3 pedals are almost always on. If I need to go to a clean tone, I'll switch the OCD off, obviously. And these pedals are also super special to me because I picked them up from my friend Scott, who was my drummer. He was in pretty much every band I ever played in until I left for Spokane. After that, I have my Run Rabbit Run, which is a vibrato. I traded some dude on Craigslist in Wisconsin for it. He said it was a prototype of some sort. I haven't been able to find anything on it. And this thing makes some pretty wild noises. A lot of those weird modulated sounds you'll hear on a record are due in part to this unit. However, it does feature a little bit of signal loss, so it's kind of unwieldy live. I prefer it more in the studio setting, but sometimes I just turn it on and let it make noises. If anyone knows anything about this, shoot me a comment. I would love to know more about it. I'd also love to get it cloned someday and maybe fix some of the issues I have with it. Lastly, in terms of fun stuff, this is what I use to generate my live solo tone. I have the Old Blood Noise Endeavors Dark Star. It's a pad reverb. You can push it a bit more and make some really wild noises. And I've done that in the studio, especially on tracks like Soliloquy. There's that cool bit crushing reverb at the beginning of that. I used the Dark Star's crush function on that. I also have the Jupiter Effects Fernweh multi-echo unit. I primarily really only use the one side of it live, but I've definitely experimented with the dual delay function in other situations. When I'm live, I really like to keep things very simple because there's a lot going on at shows. And it is already hard enough for me to hit both of these at the same time. So that's all the fun stuff on my board. I also have the TC Electronic Polytune, standard tuner go-to. I also have this TC Mic Mechanic, which I really just use in the rare event that a venue doesn't happen to have effects on their board. It's an annoying thing that does seem to happen from time to time. So that's always really nice in a pinch. I've also got my Vape Ape anti-Altoids container. Dude's wildin'. This is like a Misfits design, and I've just had this on my board as well as this glow-in-the-dark statue of Virgin Mary that I think I got from my uncle. Lastly, you'll see these purple cables all over the place. These are rattlesnake cables. They're built out in Missoula. They have a super rad artist program, and I use their cables for pretty much everything. They're both running to my amp, and they're also my speaker cable. They're just super sturdy. I've heard stories of him drop shipping them to people on tour. They're all made to order. They are a little thick, and they take a minute to break in, but once they are broken in, they are amazing live. They rarely get pulled out of pedals. That's my fault when they do. And they have choices for if you want the right angle or the straight angle, and that's super nice to have. So I highly recommend the rattlesnake cables if you want something that is going to last on the road. I'm pretty sure they have a lifetime warranty, but don't quote me on that. Unless, of course, it turns out that I'm right. So that was a rundown of all of my gear. This is the stuff I use in the studio. It's the stuff I use live. I'm very picky about gear. I do not overbuy gear. I have a very small pedal shelf. Maybe I'll make a video about pedals that didn't make it onto my board one day, or pedals that I've used that just didn't make the cut. For instance, the flanger that I was notorious for leaving on tour when I had too much fun before the set. Ask the dudes at the Blue Lagoon about that. So I'm just starting out this YouTube channel. I am trying to grow it. So if you give us a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I am working on getting a bunch more videos out. Up next, I want to do a shootout of these three guitars so you can get a sense of each of their individual characters. I might talk a little bit more about how I've used each of them in the past and what I really love about each of them. I also just put together another video that'll pop up after this that was on how I rearranged my garage in order to be a cooler YouTube space. So be sure to check those out. So until next time, stay zoinked, keep your mids cranked, and remember, together, we will defeat Big Riff. Like, assuming they're real and I didn't just make them up and they're not just like some weird acid flashback